What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Jonathan Benaya podcast. And if it's your first time here, please feel at home. Now, for the past century or so, film has formed an integral part of our lives. I do read that the large percentage of the population watches film for entertainment. But I feel like it's not only entertainment that we watch film for. I feel like film helps us to feel things that we wouldn't be able to feel in the natural world. And when I talk about feeling things that we are not able to feel in the natural world, I'm pulled towards an area that I'm very passionate about, and that's the world of natural history films, or call them wildlife films, conservation films, and the like. And when I talk about that, I'm really moved towards appreciating people that head out to the bush to capture all these amazing images, to film those animals in their natural habitat, to get the behaviors, the emotions of the wilderness areas. I think those people who spend hours, days, weeks, months, years in the bush really deserve lots and lots of credit. And it's an area that I am also involved in. It's an area where my bread is buttered, and I guess that's why a lot of the conversations we have on the show we've had in the show in the recent past have been around photography, wildlife films, and the like. Now, talking about wildlife films, I'm excited to have a discussion around wildlife films on the African continent, and I can't think of a better guest to discuss this with than Fiona Tande, who joins us all the way from Kenya. You'll get to meet her in a bit. She is she is the director at Pridelands Wildlife Fest, which I believe is the first, or was the first, African wildlife film festival on the continent. Yeah, so thank you so much for tuning in. Get yourself comfortable. As we always say, maybe get yourself some tea, coffee, hot chocolate. Just create call it a comfortable environment, and let's prepare to have an engaging discussion together. My name is Jonathan Benaya, and this is the Jonathan Benaya podcast. What's up, my beautiful people? Welcome to the Jonathan Benaya podcast, a show that is wild, very wild. We are proudly Uganda's #1 conservation and tourism show, but we also benefit from a listenership from all across the African continent and the world at large. We try to put out a new episode every Sunday with discussions ranging around how to make the natural world a better place, creating awesome images, telling stories with words, wildlife films and photography, with occasional musings on sound and tech. If these topics fascinate you as much as they interest me, I promise you this podcast will have you in a spin. I do share a lot of my personal experiences, and from time to time, I'll have one or two guests on the podcast to have some very insightful discussions. So thank you so much for tuning in, and enjoy your time here. All right, guys, welcome back to the Jonathan Benaya podcast. The Jonathan Benaya podcast covers so many topics. Largely, we do talk about the earth, words, images, wildlife films and photography, tourism and travel, and from time to time, we'll slide in a conversation on music and tech. On the podcast today, as I did mention before the break, I'm joined by Fiona Tande, who is the director at Pridelands Wildlife Film Fest. Fiona, thank you so much for joining the show today. Please say hello to the listeners.
Hi, Jonathan. Thank you so much for having me. And, hello to all the listeners out there.
Fantastic. How is Kenya? How is the 254?
Kenya is great. Our weather is good. As you can imagine, being on the equator, it's really good. So, kuna mambo.
Fantastic. Now, let me just get a little bit about where your journey begins, how you end up in conservation and then into the world of wildlife filmmaking. Because I did read that you started out in conservation.
That's right. I got into conservation in a not so conventional way. I was studying community development in university, and I just felt like this pull. I've always loved wildlife. I mean, the Maasai blood in me just is drawn to wildlife naturally and animals. And getting into community development was really my second way of just honestly doing something in uni, because I wasn't about to do veterinary studies, which was really the only study that was presented to me if I wanted to get into anything that had to do with animals. Because at the time, people were not educated on these other aspects of wildlife, of engaging wildlife other than as a vet.
Yeah.
And so getting into that, I still was really torn by interacting with humans rather than people. So I started volunteering with conservation organizations. And that's one thing I love about Kenya, is that we are so ahead in terms of conserving our wildlife. I mean, I know it's the same across Africa, but Kenya is really at the cusp of just accelerating when it comes to conservation. So I was able to penetrate that industry. But for me, there was a film, The Last Lions by the Juberas, that actually catapulted me into that industry. It's by watching that film and seeing the plight of our lions that I was like, I really need to act now. I don't have time to weigh whether or not I can come into this industry. So I started volunteering. And then by the time I graduated from university, I was absorbed in the conservation world and just got a job and started literally winging it. So basically no background in conservation, no science, no biology, but just that passion and drive. People recognized it and took me into their organization. So I started working with different conservation organizations, from whether it's lions to cheetahs to I went as far as working with sea turtles. Like, there was nowhere I wasn't penetrating. And then came an opportunity in 2018 to attend a course. Now, I always I never really thought of film as an industry that I could get into, as much as it had literally converted me into a conservationist. It wasn't something I had any idea or even like somewhat any semblance of a thought that this is a place I can be. But someone just mentioned, hey, maybe they mentioned that they'd want to get into wildlife filmmaking. And I'm like, and then it's like a bulb went on in my head. And I'm like, actually, that is a career that we could explore. And so she didn't end up doing it, but I literally ran with it. And most of the courses were presented in the UK. I had no interest in going into a 4-year program. So when I came across this month course in South Africa, and then on the continent, I was like, this is brilliant. This is perfect. And so I enrolled, I went down to South Africa, I did that. And the course allowed us to, see whether it's camera work, whether it's pitching, whether it's production. We were able to be given the basic skills in all of them. And then when I came back to Kenya, I hit the ground running. I didn't go back into conservation again, because I also had my reservations about the industry, because it was very political and bureaucratic. Yeah, exactly. It was so bureaucratic. Like, the help wasn't getting to the animals as it's usually told in the reports. And I didn't feel, I wasn't comfortable with being part of something like that. So I figured, hey, film, maybe, just telling the stories is enough. There's no politics in that or anything. And so, in 2019, I got the chance to join another course that was being done in Kenya. And then from that, the director wrote a recommendation letter that enabled me to attend Jackson Wild out in Wyoming, the US. And that really, really helped me meet all these people that I'd been watching it on Nat Geo my whole life, and just interact with them. And it was such an eye-opening experience, and also like it was this it was both bittersweet because it was a good experience to get to meet these people, but I could always it was just me and like a couple of other Kenyans and
Yeah.
Africans, it was just there wasn't a lot of representation, and it made me feel like I wish a lot of us could be here, but
Yeah.
not everyone could be sponsored, not everyone could get the scholarship. So when I came back, the world shut down in 2020 because of the pandemic. And so I organized a little, like a film lab out in Mara, and I called all these people that I knew were into wildlife filmmaking, and we just went out there and filmed because we had the access.
Yeah.
We were sponsored by a hotel out there to stay, and it was just such an magical experience seeing how people were how people's passions were reignited
Yeah.
because of being given that opportunity. And that's how I knew that. And then from those films I tried to submit them into festivals. They weren't received as well as I wanted, and so I went back to the drawing board, and I was like, you know what, we need something on this continent that celebrates our stories,
Yeah.
that celebrates our voices, where the way we tell our stories is received well. And so that's how Pridelands Wildlife Film Fest was born back in 2021. And I've been, hard at work just creating this home for our African storytellers, and not
Yeah.
only them, but also the global South, so that our voices find a home where they can just be celebrated and accommodated and received.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's been a journey. That's basically my journey in a nutshell.
Wow, it's a very interesting and also very inspiring story, especially I guess anyone that's tuned in, anyone that's I guess shares sentiments like myself around African stories told by indigenous Africans. I think yours is a very interesting story, but just listening to the story and also the origins of Pridelands, I'm tickled towards asking a question around why aren't we seeing a lot of African filmmakers in these large film productions or part of these crews that come to the continent to create all these incredible nature documentaries on BBC Earth, Nat Geo. Of course, I believe a lot has changed in the recent years with folks like yourself, but I feel like we could use a bit more of our own people telling our own stories. So I'd like to know what is holding us back in, if I could call it, penetrating into that space.
Well, you have to remember that, first of all, like I said, when I was watching this series and films on the Nat Geos and the BBCs, none of these people looked like me, so already that was, I was detached from that practice, as it was presented to me as this is a space for a few. It's an exclusive space. And even from my own attempt at getting in on those productions after I went for my training in South Africa, I found it really hard. Like they didn't have room or budgets for local filmmakers, which was absurd for me, because it was like, if anything, it saves you money to employ local crew. So I think, and this is also a topic that we will delve into in the festival. It's just how these films have been presented to us. We've been disenfranchised for so long. And so people on the African continent have been looking at the more conventional careers, whether it's being a doctor or a lawyer. That's the industry that they feel they fit in. For wildlife, it's been so exclusive for so long. It's just now that people are like, okay, this is something I can actually
I
be
could explore
in.
a career.
But exactly. But this wasn't the case in like the past 5 years. If anything, the pandemic has accelerated this notion of local crews. Without it, it would be still the same game being played, where crews come in and extract from Africa and go and tell their audiences. Because not only are we not involved as local crew, we're not involved as the
Yeah.
audience. So for me, it's just, I think Africa has just been so rich, but all we've been experiencing is just exploitation and extraction. And I'm encouraged by the movement that I'm seeing now. Like, there's definitely, it's so different from when I was getting in. Like, I literally was like among like the only 3 people I knew that
Whoa.
wanted to get into the industry. Yeah. And this is just 5 years ago. It's not like ancient times,
Yeah.
it's not like in the 80s. I wasn't trying to get in the it's just 5 years ago. And so there's been an explosion since, but still you find that how we're being absorbed is still in the minority jobs, whereby we're being given little roles or trainings. Like, it's constantly perpetuating this idea that we're still not good enough, which is, it's such a crazy notion,
Yeah.
because we have the access to these stories. So for me, what I would say to your question is, I think that's a reason why you're not seeing a lot of people yet. Yet again, these usually, I think the limelight is still very focused on a certain few individuals, but on the ground you'll find there's a lot of people doing such amazing work.
Yeah.
And it's podcasts like yours, or other avenues that will help shine a light on what people on the ground are doing. But there are people, and there are coming up, luckily. And that's why even Pridelands could even be set up, is because 5 years ago we didn't have films coming out of Africa,
Yeah.
as opposed to now I can be able to set up a platform where we showcase African films, or films told from the global south. Because we all, as much as we are Africans, we share this experience and this journey with a lot of other people who've been disenfranchised from this industry.
Yeah. Wow. Fantastic. And as you submitted, I'd like your discussion around us having access to these stories. And I think that's a benefit that I think having film crews from the continent, you have the benefit of, if I could call it, the context, or also the authenticity of the story, that we are telling a story
True.
that is our own. But also just the fact that we are always out here, we're always, this is home for us.
Exactly. Yeah, it is. And that's to what you said. It's exactly it. We have such access to these stories. We can tell them in a way that will resonate with our audience, more than the foreign crews could ever even attempt to tap into.
Yeah.
And that's something I would encourage up and coming African filmmakers, whether it's in natural history, whether it's in fiction. Let's stay true to our roots. I feel like that's what's gonna help us penetrate this industry more than trying to copy,
Okay.
or be like what these other films have done. Because there's so many stories that we have access to, that we can tell, and authentically, that I would encourage people listening to stick to their roots.
Yeah. Fantastic. Now we're going to take a break, but before we do that, I'd like to throw something at you. Well, to put you in a bit of an uncomfortable space. Are you more of an advocate for Africa-only crews, or would you be more appreciative of more of a collaboration?
So should I answer this or after the break?
Yeah, you can answer it, then we'll go for the break. Yeah.
Okay. So for me, look, I'm not trying to exclude anyone.
Yeah.
It would be amazing to collaborate, but how I feel, I think I'm also really gung ho on having African filmmakers tell their own stories from their perspectives.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you don't engage other people, collaborate with other filmmakers,
Yeah.
but also be able to stand in your truth. Don't be swayed into telling other people's stories, because I feel like that's where we lose our touch. Is we collaborate and then we disappear in that collaboration, and then it becomes their story.
Yeah. Oh well, that's a very nice submission. Okay, so
Thank you.
Okay, so the conversation is going to continue after the short break, but just now we're going to know our spotlight of the week. This week's Safari Spotlight is around a new discovery. On Tuesday, the Uganda Wildlife Authority reported the return of the African painted dogs, or call them the wild dogs, which in the past were also called African hunting dogs. And there's no one better to share the detail of the news than my good friend Gilbert, a ranger working with Uganda Wildlife Authority in Kidepo Valley National Park, who is also, I believe, responsible for this particular sighting. Yes, Gilbert, please tell me about your incredible discovery that rocked the conservation and travel world this week.
Yeah, it's true that we had an unexpected discovery this week in Kidepo Valley National Park. It was on Monday around 9 a.m. when I was heading to Karenga. On my way after Narus Valley around 600 meters, I found two unique animals standing on the way. They resemble domestic dogs, but they have a lot of spots on the body.
Okay.
So when I picked my phone, I managed to grab some photos. Then later, I shared the photo with the Warden Tourism and some few friends in conservation.
Yeah.
And then later, Warden Tourism sent the photos to the communication manager, Uganda Wildlife Authority. Then he confirmed to us that those are African wild dogs. So they were believed they left the country early years ago.
Extinct.
So it's everyone's surprised to see them back.
Yeah.
That the African wild dogs are back in Kidepo.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing the news with us, and I hope the dogs can stay around. Now, I believe it's been over 4 decades. That's over 40 years since the African dogs were believed to be extinct in Uganda. It's good to see them return and also see several other recent discoveries around species that were considered extinct in the past. Talk about sightings of the white-eared kob, which was recently sighted in Kidepo as well. Talk about sightings of, there's a particular gazelle, I don't know if it's a Thompson's gazelle, beg to be corrected. And then you have the African painted dog being sighted again. You did have the Fox's Weaver being sighted in Pian Upe and there are surrounding areas. So it's good to see that some of these animals are now being sighted again in Uganda. Now, I know these dogs are savage hunters, they are brutal hunters, and their style of hunting might not be, I guess, one for the faint of hearts. But I think with how sought after they are, especially for people coming to Africa for safaris, I think this is a plus for tourism, but it also speaks to the incredible work that the Uganda Wildlife Authority is doing in creating a safe haven for wildlife, including those that had since gone extinct. In case you'd like to learn more about African painted dogs, be sure to listen to an episode we did. I believe it's one of the very first episodes we did of the podcast, where we broke the news about CTC Conservation Center importing their first pair of African painted dogs. I spoke to the director, Thomas Price, and the manager, Holly Oliver Kello, on this fantastic news. Now, CTC Conservation Center is the only place in Uganda to see wild dogs, but I must state that this is a captive breeding facility. It's not the wild. But I guess that's going to change very soon, especially with the recent sighting in Kidepo Valley National Park. All right, guys, welcome back to the Jonathan Bedar podcast. Our conversation continues. We are still having a chat about wildlife films, so call it wildlife filmmaking. And I'm honored to have the director at Pridelands Wildlife Film Fest, Fiona Tande. So, Fiona, I think let's resume the discussion, as we resume, I think I'm more interested in knowing. I guess it's a challenge that is in the film world all around. We do not have as many female filmmakers. I don't know if that's factual in the whole film industry, but when I guess glance into the wildlife film space, I don't see way too many female filmmakers, females on cameras. I know that has changed a bit in the recent times. I do see in Kenya you have Dr. Paula Kahumbu really pushing that, encouraging more Africans to come on film sets, but also encouraging females to come into this space. How are we doing in interesting our sisters to come into this space, and how can we do this better?
I think here's the thing, like there are female camera operators. It's still just starting to take off in the global north.
Yeah.
But there and these movements like wildlife camera women that's on Facebook, where it's literally made up of 700 female filmmakers. So we are out there. It's just that I think the difference between men and women is that we're more soft spoken, whereas men are so happy to thump their chest and be like, we're out here,
Yeah.
But in truth, females are out there doing their thing. So it's just because, I mean, the thing is that it's just taking off in North America and Europe.
Yeah.
So by the time as Africa we catch up, it's gonna be a bit of a while. But there are up and coming female filmmakers, camera operators. I know of a really good one out in Tanzania called Erica Rugabanda Bandana, and the thing is those are the little people that we don't hear about so much. Because again, the spotlight is on probably one individual and everyone focuses on them. And then but there are other people basically doing the same thing out here on the continent. And I definitely know of a few good camera women on the continent, and producers as well. And then that's the thing, there's so many facets of wildlife filmmaking. It's not just camera operation. There's producing, there's field directing, there's researching, there's story development. There are so many aspects that I feel like because I think wildlife filmmaking is presented as one thing, mainly like camera operation. So it kind of maybe scares a few females, because they're like, I don't know, I'm not sure about this tech stuff or camera work. I'm not good at that, and I don't think I will be good at that. But it's so important to speak on these other aspects of filmmaking that I feel like they could do a great job in. Like personally, I came in wanting to be a camera operator, but it was just hard to keep up with the codecs and the raws and the field of depth and focal length. So, but I found my calling in producing and directing, and that's where now I'm trying to build my career up in. And so that's what I would encourage any females out there who are listening is this industry has so much space for you. Just do your research and just do it. Just start wherever you are. Start, and let that be your North Star.
Wow, that's very inspiring.
Thanks.
Thanks for that. Ladies tuned in, I honestly don't have anything to add. But as you talked about that, you slid in a bit of detail about how I guess huge the film world is. It's not just about the person on the camera pressing the shutter or pressing the record button. There's a whole lot that goes on behind the scenes, and that pushes me towards, or rather it tempts me towards about asking for, if I could call it, a brief masterclass from you, a very short one, around how do you, I guess, with all the hours spent in the bush, all those months, all those years, and sometimes as you're working on a piece, how do you get all that footage into a constructive story that then communicates a cause, but also really, if I could say, touches the emotions of the viewer? I don't know. It's quite a broadish question, but I'm asking for a bit of a masterclass for myself and I guess plenty of the listeners who would be interested in knowing more about this field from someone experienced like yourself, but also, I guess, people aspiring to walk a similar journey as well.
Right. So in terms of footage, that's always, you go out there, you film on whatever camera you have. You make sure to log in your footage as you transfer it to your hard drive. That's usually, of course, the standard. But before even getting to that, researching on your stories, you don't just show up somewhere and start filming.
Yeah.
You have to really be one with the story that you want to tell. You have to be really familiar. You have to know it by heart, and then come up with a short list. Call your people on the ground. Find out the timings that are best to film, and then that's when now you show up. That's this pre-production side of things, where you're doing your research, you're developing your story, you're coming up with your shortlist, your storyboard, basically seeing how you want your film to end up, building these sequences. And then once you go on the ground, you minimize the amount of time that you're out there, because again, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
You can't, in Africa, we don't have the big budgets. So you want to make sure that all your time is accounted for, so that when you're on the ground, this is the person that I'm going to interview. This is the animal. This is the time it shows up. These are the golden hours. This is when the sun rises. This is the light that I can use. And then you go back and now post-production starts, the editing, putting together that footage into a sequence that tells a story. And then that's how you basically come up with your film, is just pre-production, production, and then post-production.
Wow, fantastic. And I really like that you really put an emphasis on the pre-production phase. I think that's something that's really overlooked by many people who are really excited about picking up a camera and getting ready. From experience, I know when I was starting out, when I was creating some of my smaller pieces, I know I used to just go out and shoot, and when I would come back, it used to give me a lot of headache to make sense of the footage.
Exactly. Yeah. It's so good. It's just all about planning, really. That's the whole gist of it, is good planning. So when you're going out there, you know that these are the shots that I need to make this story come to life, rather than showing up and then shooting everything and having this a huge amount of footage that you have to cram into a story. It's just, it all boils down to good planning.
Good planning, yes. Okay, so Fiona, we're going to have a listener's question. Usually our listener's question comes from people who tune into the show. And so basically what I'll do, I'll send out a call. People send in questions for a variety of subjects. And then I'll choose and see what fits which episode. So this particular week, we have a question from a gentleman called Noah. He's tuning in from Canada. He's a Ugandan living in Canada. And my colleague Ashley will read it out.
Our listener's question for the day comes in from Noah, and he says, How important is it to have strong conservation knowledge in order to have a successful wildlife filmmaking career? I know the majority of filmmakers today are in it for the money. But how critical is that knowledge and passion for the bush?
Thanks, Noah, for that question, and thanks, Ashley, for reading it out for us. So, Fiona, back to you. Basically, what Noah is asking is around the importance of conservation knowledge. I know in your introduction you did mention that I guess you starting out with this passion for the wild, your interest in knowing these animals, your love for conservation, I guess it's having an impact on how successful the kind of stories you're doing are running. So basically what Noah was asking is how important is that conservation knowledge in running a career like yours in this wildlife film space?
It's very important, I think, because as a filmmaker, you also have to remember that you're working with wildlife. You're not working with like talent that's
models and talents,
trained on how to turn on cue or run on cue or whatever. This is the natural world, and you have to come in having a respect for it. So having a conservation knowledge is absolutely vital. That's how it also is like the difference between life and death, because running up to a lion and putting a camera in its face because you have no idea that these animals do not like these things is what will determine whether you're successful or basically dead. So it's knowing your animal, the species that you're going to film, getting all the information you can get beforehand, so that it can make it easier for you to integrate into their world without interfering in any sort of way. So I would say absolutely, that's a really good question, Noah, because it's true. People just get into it thinking it's a glamorous industry. It's one with money. I can tell you one thing for sure. It's not one. Do not be deceived in any way, shape, or form. This industry is pure passion, drive, and love for this natural history and wildlife. So, getting into it with that basis will completely like throw you off. Like, this is an industry that you have to have a respect for your animals, for the wild spaces, and for their home, their habitat, and remember that you're a guest there and act accordingly. Even with your filming, being able to know that this is the lens I will take because I can't be within this amount of space with that animal. I also don't want to get in or interfere with maybe a chase or so I will keep my distance and use this type of lens so that I get the action, but from a respectful distance. Those are the kind of things you'd have to put into consideration as you're going out to film, and you can't do that without conservation knowledge.
Wow, fantastic. Well, Noah, I hope your question is answered, and I really like how Fiona really wrapped it up in, if I could call it, responsible filmmaking. Just respect the destinations, respect the wild places, respect the elements, and that usually rewards you. When you budge onto a lion, it will probably run away, and you might not have enough time to shoot it.
Exactly. And patience. I would also say a lot of patience, because again, like we said, these are not humans that you're telling, run on this mark or do this when I need you to do it. You have to be willing to sit and wait for a hunt, and then again observe it respectfully rather than trying to, you see a lot of these stories in the Mara where vehicles are constantly interfering with the migration, and that's because people are just probably the drivers, they're not well trained in respecting or conservation knowledge. So you find that all they are doing is responding to their clients who want that action shot, which is not, it's really not ideal in wildlife filmmaking, especially.
All right, that's interesting, Fiona. And as we end towards the end of the episode, I think I usually like to save the in Uganda. I don't know what's the case in Kenya. When you're eating the meal, you usually want to save the meat at the end.
Right.
You want to serve the good stuff at the end. Yeah. So
very true. It's
Fiona,
very similar here.
Oh, it's the same. Fantastic. So Fiona, you have the Pridelands Wildlife Film Festival happening. What edition is it? Is it the 3rd edition?
This is the second edition. Okay. We had the first launch last year, so this will be the second edition, yes.
Okay, fantastic. Do you mind just telling us a bit more about it? When is it going to take place? Where is it going to take place? Who is it for?
I absolutely do not mind. Yeah, absolutely. First of all, we had a call for submissions where people were submitting their films. It ends tomorrow. So if anyone out there who's listening has a film that pertains to wildlife conservation and the environment, we have 11 fantastic categories from amateur to best in cinematography. So it really caters to all walks of life of filmmakers, whatever stage of your career you're in. Feel free to hop onto our website and you'll get all those details of how to submit your film. The festival this year is taking place in coastal Kenya. The reason being is that everything tends to happen in Nairobi, and with the festival, what I wanted to do is explore the magic of Kenya. And so I launched it last year in Nairobi, but I want to be able to include all community members of our country. So this time we took it to the coastal town of Watamu, and it takes place from July 26th to the 29th, whereby 26th is the arrival of delegates from all over the continent and the world. And then we kick off the panel discussions from the 27th. And then we close with the celebration of the films that have been submitted and awarding the prizes, which are really exciting this time. So I would encourage anyone out there who's still on the fence about submitting a film to do it. You never know. Plus, with the judges that we have, we even have we have amazing Kenyan directors who've had their films featured at the Academy Awards, and we also have a judge that is is also a member of the Academy Awards. So again, the whole idea for bringing these judges together is so that they can see the work that's on this continent and be able to see that we have things to offer. As much as it's not exclusive, the film entries is not exclusive to Africa, but we do have, we are open to the stories that are being told by Africans, and we have a special category called Best African Film that is specifically for Africans. So do submit your work if you have any. But yeah, basically the festival takes place in Watamu, July 26th to the 29th. We have our festival passes on sale, and you could always find that on our all those details on our social media handles. Try our IG. It's going to be on the link in the bios. PWFF Fest is our IG handle and Twitter handle. So, find us there. Come out. We will be providing transport from Nairobi for those who will be coming from Nairobi, or that's the central place. Transport from Nairobi to Watamu and back to Nairobi. So on the 26th. So if you are looking, if you're probably having a hard time thinking of how you'll get there, we could always provide the transport via bus.
Yeah.
And then the accommodation place is Temple Point Resort. That's our venue partner, but you're always free to explore other accommodation options that match your budget. But that's going to be the main venue where we'll have all the panels and the film screenings and the conservation activities. So roll up, show up, all tell your friends. We would love to see Ugandan representation.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Tanzanians that are planning to come out. So let's build ourselves, and anyone out there who's listening, come through. It's open to everyone. It's not just for filmmakers, conservationists, anyone who wants to learn more about this industry. You're more than welcome to the festival. This is not an exclusive space. It is very inclusive of everyone.
Wow, fantastic. You've had it. It's July 26th to the 29th. We'll leave the Pridelands details down. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll find it in the description. If you're listening to the podcast in the audio form, you'll be able to access their links and their details in the podcast notes. Now, Fiona, just before I let you go, I'm interested in knowing, one, is there any plan to, I guess, get the festival to move around the region to start with, and maybe Africa as well? And then maybe the other, my last question as we close would be, is a festival only for, like, if I could call them pro shooters, or I do see if I could call it a budding discussion around mobile photography. I don't know if that's an element that is catered for in your categories as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. So with the category that I talked about, the amateur film award, that's for people who are out there making films on devices that they have, whether it's a phone, whether it's a DSLR camera. This is your category to enter your film. You don't have any training, you don't have any background in wildlife filmmaking. This is a category for you, because you're trying out the skills. So put in your film in that category. And absolutely, the festival is for everyone. Like I've said before, it's not only for pros, it's definitely for people who are even just curious. Maybe they have no interest in coming into wildlife filming, but they're curious about it. This is for you as well. This is for everyone on the continent who has an interest and a love for everything wildlife, and also those people who may not have anything, any interest whatsoever, but would love to interact with people in that space. So come all, feel free. And in terms of having PWFF roving, it's definitely in in discussions. I know there's been a lot of there was a request. There's actually a lot of requests in Tanzania. So we want to first of all finish going around Kenya, because there's so much to see on in our country, and we definitely are open to exploring going to other parts of the continent, because like you rightfully said in the beginning, this is not only Africa's first wildlife festival. It's like the only festival on the continent by the people, for the people, and that is inclusive of us. This is the only festival that does that. So we would absolutely love to go out to West Africa, Central, North, South, and just showcase this love for nature with the rest of our African brothers and sisters.
Wow, fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Fiona, for joining the show today. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
And
absolutely.
I'd like to wish you the very best. I know the next days are going to be very busy for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but I wish you the very best.
It's been super busy since since the beginning of the year, and of course things are ramping up towards the festival. But yeah, we hope to see our Ugandan brothers and sisters. I hope you, Jonathan, are planning to lead to lead that convoy of Ugandans coming out to the festival.
Fantastic. I'll definitely put it in my plan to come and mobilize a few guys as well.
Awesome. That's fantastic. We can't wait to have you guys and see you in person and have you all learn with us as we try to penetrate this industry and make it our own.
Fantastic. Thank you once again for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, guys, that should be the end of today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. If you did, go ahead and hit that like button. Share the link in your circles, and let's get this conversation beyond this platform. As you've heard, the Pridelands Wildlife Film Festival takes place from July 26th, and tomorrow is actually the deadline for the submissions for those that are submitting their films. If I say tomorrow, this might actually go live tomorrow on the day of the deadline. So if you're listening to this, then you really need to submit your film really, really quickly. For those that just can't have enough of these conversations, please be sure to subscribe to the podcast. I'm sure that those that are listening to us on Apple Podcasts will be able to leave a star rating on the show. This has really kept us high up the charts. We've been the country's number one travel and wildlife podcast for the last, if I could say, 4 months, which is very good progress. So please keep reviewing the show, keep leaving a star rating as well. As we already said, the podcast is available on all major streaming platforms where you access your shows from. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. Where else are we? We are available on Castbox, iHeartRadio for those tuning in the US, and several other platforms. I'd like to once again let you know that you can send in your contributions. You can share a question like Noah did for this particular week. Just use the email addresses down below in the podcast description. Either contact@jonathanbenaya.com or ahabenathan@pm.me. Those are the emails that you can use. You'll be able to find them down below. And maybe I'll also just want to once again say a very big thanks to our Patreons. It's through your support that we are able to keep the show alive, and your monthly pledges really keep us going. And with that said, I'd like to wish you, a wonderful week, wonderful July. I guess July begins in a few hours, and I just want to encourage you to just keep having those responsible travels, keep them thoughtful, and I guess we'll have to meet in the next one.
The Jonathan Benaya podcast is not only inspired by nature and travel, but by the people that work in it and those that are passionate about it.